All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code podcast5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. After unsuccessfully trying to outrun the stress of life, Christy Desai finally looked for a therapist in hopes of catching her breath. What started as 3 to 5 sessions turned into years of deep inner work. Her own experience turned into a personal mission to help others feel stronger, better, and more alive. Christy returned to school to pursue a master's in clinical psychology, as well as becoming a licensed marriage and family therapist. Being on both sides of therapy, as a client and a therapist, Christy saw how antiquated the process was for people to start therapy. She became determined to find a way to eliminate the barriers of entry to seeking therapy, which led to the creation of OK Humans. OK Humans is a complete fresh approach to face-to-face talk therapy dedicated to modernizing and demystifying the entire experience around therapy. Christy, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here. I am so excited about the launch of OK Humans. I want to know how you came up with this amazing idea and kind of like the background. So you obviously opened this with Brittany and Allie Webb of the Drybar, a friend, a client, and Brittany Driscoll of Squeeze, and also a friend. And I've spoken at Squeeze in the past on like nutrition group conversations with some of their members. And so it was so fun to see that this concept was being launched. And I'm just so excited for you. And I want to know all about it and how you came up with the idea. So thank you for being here. And let's talk about what is OK Humans.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kelly. I'm excited to talk about OK Humans. I'm from the Midwest, where I grew up hearing the term Bible thumper. And so I've coined myself a therapy thumper. So I talk a lot about therapy. I'm excited to talk about OK Humans. But OK Humans is a place where you can go for talk therapy. So I was a client before I ever was a therapist. And so my own experience in therapy really, it just was one of those things where it just kind of set my world on fire, where I saw the world in a whole new way. I saw people in new ways. I knew new things about myself that I never had known. It just was this amazing experience. And I don't know how familiar you are with therapy, but at first it can be, when I went into therapy, it was like, how do I was excited I didn't cry. Like in a set, it was like, oh good, I didn't cry. And then I learned over time, like, actually it's good to cry and I need to cry. And that's one of the things I had to work on, which was like being in touch with my emotions and like experiencing them and not, shaming myself for them. And then, then therapy can get really messy and then it gets really good, right? So there's this whole path where it's just this experience unlike any other. And so it impacted me so much that I went back to school became a marriage and family therapist. So I wanted to help people in the same way that I had been helped. And in doing that, I was like, well, I mentioned that I had worked with Allie Webb before. A long time ago. I feel like I've lived a few different lives, but a long time ago, I was a hairstylist. And so I worked at the Drybar. And one of the reasons why I worked at the Drybar was because they were doing something different. It was like amazing. The brand was so cool. And I wanted to franchise the Drybar way back in the day. So I had just been watching what everyone was doing, how they were doing it, and seeing things like the Drybar, like Squeeze for massage, like even Heyday for facials, or Warby Parker for sunglasses, right? Like there were all these brands I was watching and looking. Like locally, there was Santa Monica, there's a boxing gym called Box Union. So I just was like, what are people doing and how are they doing it? And why can't this be applied to therapy? Like, why can't we speak to consumers in the language that they know, that they're experiencing in all these different verticals? And so that was what I did. I created OK Humans, and that's what we are. We're a brick and mortar, a storefront. We're on San Vicente next to Susie Cakes and Pisana in Brentwood. So we have a wellness shop at the front. And then as you come around the corner, there's a lounge where you wait for your therapist. And then there's therapy suites where you can, sit in this beautiful space and talk to a therapist, which hopefully becomes your therapist that you'll then have an ongoing relationship with. So we're more affordable, we're a little more accessible, and we're super passionate about normalizing, destigmatizing, demystifying. Like not everyone knows what happens in therapy or what it's like. And so we are just trying to do it in a new way to not only give people permission to go to therapy, but to all the conscious things that keep people out of therapy, all the hurdles that make it hard and difficult, like maybe price, hassling with insurance. We submit insurance reimbursement and everything. So we just created, and this is what Brittany's really amazing at and what Allie's really amazing at, we created this experience around going to therapy to just make it as amazing as possible. We didn't want that to be the thing that stopped people. Because the work that you do in the room, that part is like, that's therapy, that's work. It can be difficult, it can be life-changing, but because it's so important, we wanted to make it easier for people to get to therapy.
It's so important. And I do feel like when I think back to the first time I sought out a therapist, it was sort of jump online, go on Yelp, see who's in your neighborhood, try to cross-reference if they were covered by your insurance, kind of read some of those reviews, and you're going to a medical building and you're waiting in a room where you're flicking on a light to let people know that you're there. And it's like supposed to be sort of sneaky, it feels like. I'd love to know how you grew up and when you decided to go to therapy, and if it was something that like your family embraced or was something that you started to embrace as the first generation in your family to embrace it. I was definitely the first person in my family to embrace it. I think my parents really leaned on their faith and going to talk to a priest or do things like that and praying about things. But, I love to talk. So I was the first person in my generation in my family, the first, person in my family to search that out and decide that it was something that I felt like I needed. What about you? Like, how did you first come to realize or decide like therapy was for you? And was it a part of your upbringing?
I love your story. That's amazing. I can relate because I'm certainly first generation therapy goer. It was the very first time I went to therapy. It was family therapy. My parents were going through a divorce, and it was like in a crisis moment. And we went once, and the therapist kind of, I don't even know what the goal exactly was or why, but maybe to sort of just have this. Your parents are going through a divorce and, that kind of thing. I'm the four out of five. And so all I can remember is, I grew up in a small town. We had to drive an hour and a half away to go to this therapist who was in this random house. It was just this really weird experience. And my brothers were were really like, I think they were flipping each other off and I don't even know what, it was just this, what I remember was just this commotion of like, just my brothers being horrible and it just being embarrassing. And, so that was kind of like my first association with therapy, which was like, who would do this? I'm like, I don't even know what this is about. And then I got married really young. I lived in New York City. I had my first, who was probably like 1 at the time. And my husband is first generation, born and raised in New Jersey, but his parents are from India. And so there was a lot of things happening, like, just different cultures merging, different families merging, even if you don't come from different cultures, having a baby. I'm originally from the Midwest, and I lived in New York City, and I went to New York City for the summer to be a nanny, and I thought I was going to, be there for the summer. And then I met my husband and I got married and had a kid and never left. And so there was like plenty to go to therapy about. And I, for some reason, like you, I just looked at my insurance. I found someone in the neighborhood. I showed up. I made an assumption that perhaps she was familiar with the Jewish culture or like religion, and that perhaps hopefully she wouldn't judge me harshly for being married so young and having a baby. I just sort of had this fear that like, the therapist would be like, well, obviously you need therapy. Like, what were you thinking kind of thing? And that was my very first experience with therapy. And she was much more analytical. I never got a sense of like loving her or liking her or feeling like I had a read on her even. And I didn't know what was happening, but I knew that when I showed up every week, I just felt better. Like I felt lighter. I felt less stressed. There were definitely some moments and things that she had done, just like kind of help me find my voice, like in my relationship or, just different things. And so I can pinpoint even like minor, like I wanted to get a Vespa to get around New York City because you're dependent on public transportation. And I was actually finishing my undergrad and I was like, I'm never going to like graduate college if I can't, like if I have to wait for the bus to get through Central Park or if I have to, and so in my mind, like the solution was a Vespa. And my husband was like, are you crazy? And my therapist was like, why can't you have the Vespa? So it was, so I got a Vespa and it was like the most helpful thing ever. And I could get where I needed to go. And the city became like smaller all of a sudden. I went for a year. I had this, I don't even know how to describe it. It wasn't like this amazing, great experience. It was like, okay, that's helpful. I don't know this lady. I don't know what she's doing, but like, that's helpful. And I had been in there for a year. And another thing she did was she encouraged me to apply for my internship at The View. So I had met the producer of The View. He was walking on the street and I went up to him and I said, I'm a senior, I'm about to graduate college, but I'd love an internship at The View. And I applied and I didn't get it. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I like talked to the executive producer. Like if they were going to hire me, they would have hired me. But she was like, well, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you have to follow up, So I followed up and then eventually I got an internship there. But so those were kind of two ways she really like big takeaways, I think, in my life. But other than that, I'm like, I don't know what this lady's doing or how this works. And I'd been in therapy for a year and I started working at The View and I was like, I can't do this forever. Like I'm done, And I was like done. I like lived my life. And then eventually we moved to LA. My husband's job took us here and I opened a franchise concept out in New York City. It was a mommy and me. And so I owned a business, I had kids, and I had a girlfriend just in passing talk about her experience in therapy. And I was like, I could use that. Like, that sounds like I just need like to catch my breath. And so I showed up to her therapist thinking I'd go a couple times. And that was 7 years ago. And I like go religiously every week. And it changed my life. It literally changed my life.
I love that. I love that so much because you're giving two examples. Like sometimes I feel like people need a therapist for a certain period of time when they're feeling overwhelmed, they're going through something big, or they need to talk it out. And I love that you explain the relationship with your therapist, being really analytical, not being able to get a read on her. I think there are so many obviously different types of people. So different types of therapists and their response, warmth, are they analytical? Are they helping you kind of figure out your own conclusion or a solution to your own problem? Or are they supporting you in finding that solution? Like there are so many different types of people, and finding the right therapist or someone where, like, look at your second experience. You thought it would be maybe a few times. And now fast forward 7 years later, and this person's helping you be a better version of yourself and take things off your chest, lighten your load, probably has empowered you to do something big, like start OK Humans, has been integral in you, being the best wife and mom you can be, really focusing on yourself. And I'd love to kind of dive deeper into that. But I do think that it's so interesting to see people's therapy journeys because sometimes it's the therapist that really pulls you through. Sometimes it's just getting that experience off your chest. And sometimes maybe it's a really big trauma that needs more support. And so I just love that OK Humans has this option that we're destigmatizing it, that people can walk in, feel like they're in a wellness spa or something, have an experience with a therapist and go like, is this my forever therapist or do I need to try again? without worrying like, oh, I'm going to need to break up with this person. Because I think there's something there too, where you feel like, okay, they're saying, I'll see you next week. You're going, oh, okay. And then it's a whole thing like, is this the right move or the wrong move? And like, how do you gently break up with a therapist? Or how do you, maybe they need to teach you in therapy how to set your boundaries and say like, this isn't working out. But can we talk about your experience with your therapist now and some of the takeaways? Obviously, with your first therapist, it was those early days, making the city feel manageable with a Vespa and deciding that her teaching you some resilience and follow through and to follow up so you can really get what you want, which I think are, resourceful things that you can take throughout your whole life. But what does the last 7 years look like in your therapy journey? And what can you attribute personal growth to, like, that experience?
Yeah. So that's the thing about kind of what you were saying, like when the therapist says, oh, I'll see you next week. I think sometimes therapy gets this rap of like, it's a business and the therapist is incentivized to have you to continue to come every week. And I totally get that from a client perspective, but from a therapist perspective, it really, like, if you think about a lifetime of all that's, transpired and happens to somebody, it takes a long time to sort through that, to unpack it, to understand it, to make meaning of it, to repackage it, right? To sort of have ownership over maybe the things that happened and to tell our story differently and let it like hit us and sit differently, right? Than kind of maybe how we originally experienced it in the trauma. And so that's difficult. That takes a long time. It doesn't happen overnight. There's a lot of amazing supportive supplemental things that can contribute to like your growth, but there is an internalization that has to happen that takes time. And so when your therapist says, I'll see you next week, and if it's the right therapist and you want to continue working with that therapist, it's not them trying to get like money from you. It's like, this is it, if your goal is to continue to grow, then it's work, and you have to show up and you have to be consistent and you have to put in the time. And so that was certainly like one thing, I, with my last 7 years, have experienced. And I always tell myself, because I do want to be mindful, like, you don't want this to become a, dependent relationship, right? Where you're like, this is now a codependent thing where I'm like, I can't think without you. But I'm always sort of asking myself, what did I get out of my session? And do I need this? There hasn't been a session where I've been like, I didn't get something and I think I'm quote unquote done, Yeah. So it just, at this point now, it's much more preventative. It's this, it's a container, right? I can get through my week and do all the things I need to do. And then I can unload in therapy and I can leave it there. And I can, we all have to like hold on to things. My day and time, I can address this or look at this deeper or see if there's, correlations or meaning, or if I'm avoiding things or, just all that sort of stuff, because it really does help. And like me becoming a therapist, my husband, who kind of culturally grew up where you didn't, although like I didn't have necessarily the culture differences around therapy. It wasn't part of my experience or vernacular. I grew up poor. We didn't have money, religious, where it was like, you pray, you figure things out. So I think about some of the things I've gotten over the last 7 years, like my house is entirely different than it was, pre-therapy. It just, and even initial therapy. And since he's done his own work and the ways that we parent and tag team and like show up for the kids and our role reversals in a lot of ways. I mean, the kids go to him sometimes first because I'm consumed with okay humans, and that wasn't always the case. And that took a while for him to even get comfortable with like, what does this look like? And how do I mother my kids, even though I'm their father in some ways, if you stick to these traditional kind of roles, I guess you could say. So, but like, yeah, my therapist now is quite different than my therapist in New York. And right away, she was more engaging and talkative in session. And I felt right at ease. And it was just what I went for is not what developed over the last 7 years. I think initially and this happens with most people, you come in with a thing that maybe was a fight or an event, or it's usually like one thing. And then it's never really about that thing. It's all the things underneath it that contribute. And then you can start to pull everything out. You just look at them as they come up, or, like the thing about in therapy, like you get to decide what you talk about. You get to decide if it's important or not important. And so I think that is nice for people to know, because it can be scary to think, oh my gosh, this thing happened to me it's too painful to look at, and so I want to continue to avoid it. And that could be a survival, technique. That's part of your resilience, and it's something that could be helping you, and so that's okay. And the therapist knows that and understands that. So just because it's hard to talk about that thing doesn't mean you can't still go to therapy and get something out of therapy and develop a relationship where it then maybe becomes safe to look at or get help with that thing that you've not wanted to.
Wow. So with OK Humans, what type of therapy is this? Because we hear about so many different types of therapy. What can people expect other than it being a beautiful lounge setting and them being called back by a therapist? Are they being paired with their therapists specifically? How long is a session? What does it look like? Yeah.
So our sessions are 45 minutes, and on our app or our website, we have therapist video bios. So you can get actually mine's quite cheesy, but you can you can get a sense for them and their personality, but you get a sense for them in that moment, right? With the kind of like a therapist who's not used to being on camera, but actually they all killed it. But you'll get to see a little video of them. And so that's nice and reassuring, because you kind of have a sense and the idea of who they are. And they talk a little bit about how they work and their style. And then there's a written bio as well. And if you still feel like, I think I might like this person, but I don't know, I want to talk to them, then we can set up a 10-minute consultation for you. But our therapists, they all have at least their master's in marriage and clinical psychology or something like that. And so whether they're a licensed marriage and family therapist or a PsyD or an associate who is done with their master's and they're about to become licensed, because you have to get 3,000 hours. So everyone has experience, and we all, as therapists, we all can kind of work with the same things, and then different people might specialize in different things depending on, kind of their own interest or their own background. But someone who's coming to OK Humans can go to the website or the app, look at the video bio. You'll see their schedule right away. You'll get to read about them and see if they might be a fit for you. And one thing about finding the quote unquote right therapist, I think sometimes it gets lost, or it maybe gets pitched in a way like you have to have the right therapist, or your therapist needs to know this in order to help you. And really, it's the relationship. Do you feel safe with this person? Do you like this person? Can you talk to this person? Because there's so much that has to be right before anything else can happen. And sometimes you might have a starter therapist who helps get you acclimated to therapy, or comfortable with certain things, and maybe you do outgrow them or need someone who specializes in something very specific. But the therapist will help you get to that person if they can't help you.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, looking back on my experience, a couple of times that I've had or worked with a therapist, was that first initial time I was actually right out of college, major horrible breakup with someone that I thought I was going to spend my whole life with, of course, as just a young woman, and, first time falling deeply in love and dealing with that kind of a betrayal and breakup. And so I ended up telling my mom, hey, I'm not getting through this. Like, I had moved home after college for a few months over the summer and trying to figure out what my next step was. And that's obviously like a huge transition. And I'm coming into this place of being like, wait, I had this plan. And that's obviously, it's not going this way. So I ended up asking my mom, hey mom, like, I really feel like I need help. And I felt like I needed her buy-in, because being the first generation of someone, I don't know, I've I had asked my parents for permission on like a majority of things in my life, which probably I could unpack with a therapist at some point in time. But, first child, parent pleaser, the whole bit. But she was obviously like, are you sure you really need that? Okay, absolutely. Very supportive of it. And I went, and I think it was like 6 weeks or something, was a game changer. I felt like it fast tracked me getting over this person that wasn't right for me. And after that, I was like, this is great. I'll dip into this when I need this, whenever I need this in the future. And so fast forward, and I saw a therapist for a minute when I moved up to LA. And I think it was like not even a month, but just kind of transitioning back. I had met Chris, moved back up to LA from Orange County, and was thrown into a job that I didn't really love. I was trying to unpack that. We'd only been dating for a little while. Chris wanted to get married really fast. And I was like, I love this person, but like, thinking I'm in my early 20s, like, there's no way, but like, how do I work through this? It was a couple of sessions and it was great. But I don't feel like that person, I feel like if that person knew me a little bit better or I was getting more out of it, I would have stayed. So that was that one little session. And then obviously, not obviously, but for people listening, they know I had a really traumatic birth story with Sebastian. And so then Chris and I went together and we went to 3 different people. And he was just like, I'm not getting anything out of this. Like, it feels really painful. It feels like I'm picking a scab. It actually hurts way more. Like, I just want to live in gratitude that like we have a healthy son. And like, if you need to like work through stuff on your own, like go to someone else. So then I went to someone by myself for 6 weeks, maybe longer than that. I think it was maybe closer to 3 months. And still never really felt like, I just keep talking about it. And it feels like everything feels like it's getting worse or like solidifying in my brain this moment. And so I ended up going to like a trauma release therapist, and that was what I needed. And it was great. Like, I felt like I released like pent up fear and stress and was like, okay. And then I was pregnant with Tasha and I felt like, okay, I can have my next child and I'm not scared of labor and I'm going to do things a different way. But like, then I had a really amazing labor with Tasha. And I think had I not taken the time to like spend time talking about it, realizing that I needed more, searching out for an expert, going a little bit deeper, I would have taken those fears and that anxiety and all of that into my second labor. And I know there was a little bit, of course, obviously still like in me about it, but I can't say enough about therapy personally as a way to like get through things. And even just talking about your experience in the last 7 years, I'm like, Chris and I both need a therapist that we can talk to individually or together just to be better humans. Just because why? I mean, if you have a business coach or you have a mentor or you have, someone in your life that really like helps you expedite and streamline, and absolutely you can do the work on your own, but if you're not making the time for it, having a weekly calendar appointment seems like the perfect way to do it.
Oh my gosh, you hit on so many important things. I think just kind of marking all those transitions that you mentioned, I think we underestimate how massive, impactful transitions can be, right? Like, everyone goes to college, everyone goes through a breakup, but when you're going through it, when it's happening to you, it matters and it's big, and it can be really helpful to process it so that you can move on. So I think that like all those transitions, and another thing too is just sort of when you have this idea about how things are going to go and they don't go, I think grief is not talked about enough. And I think grief is only talked about in like death and loss, but like we're constantly grieving. Like, there's so much to grieve. Every transition, it didn't go the way that I thought it was going to, that's grief. And so it's good to look at and to release. And it's hard to like experience the messy emotions, the uncomfortable emotions. And it makes sense that we want to, I think kind of culturally there's spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity. Like, that's a pull to not have to experience like the messy, yucky, gross, like, shit, this is overwhelming, shit, this hurts, like, my God, will it go away sort of thing, which we experience, which is part of being human, and that is unavoidable. And so the fact that we're going to experience it, instead of pushing it away, like you have to like welcome it, and allow it to like run its course in some way. And so I think that's one thing in therapy, like sort of getting that space to build what I call frustration tolerance, which I think a lot of therapists use the same lingo, but like this frustration tolerance, we've got to build a capacity to tolerate the unpleasant, the things we want to avoid. And when you build that, just like a muscle, but once you have it built, then everything just, it kind of bounces off quicker, right? It like comes, you see it, you experience it, you know it, you know what it is, and it's not so powerful.
I want to unpack so many things there. You obviously seen therapists, then you became a marriage and family therapist, you open OK Humans, you're giving accessibility to people to like get in there and see what it feels like to see a therapist and see if it's right for them. But when I look at toxic positivity, grieving, frustration tolerance, can we kind of unpack some of these? And for our generation, what are some of these like major themes and problems that you see, like toxic positivity? What is that? Like, what is the person who maybe is like too positive in a toxic way? Like, what? Oh gosh, I'm like, is that me? Oh my God, is that me?
Well, that's another thing in therapy. I feel like most everyone comes to therapy and they're like, is this me? What's wrong with me? Am I that person? Am I, it's like, what?
Should we just have this therapy session right now, Christy?
No, you're doing amazing. No, it feels weird to say toxic positivity, right? Because it's like, what could be wrong with being positive? Like it's like a stiff upper lip, right? Like sometimes you got to bend and bear it.
Yeah.
You got to grin and bear it. Like, so there's all these sort of adages that we kind of all grow up with and messages that we receive. And so in kind of, maybe it's even just a pendulum swing from like grin and bearing it, to just, like that didn't feel good. So let's just be positive, And so the thing is that it's just dismissive of the full spectrum, right? Like there's a range that we all experience. We're experiencing it. And if we continue to deny it, we're cut off from, other parts of us essentially. And we're not like fully be who we are, or fully be in that experience, that moment, or experience what's happening because we're not fully there. I think like what people are doing, I think we also underestimate how resilient we all are, like what survivors we are. I mean, that's the thing I love about being a therapist is the things people get through. It's absolutely effing amazing, And so I think that whatever somebody's doing to get through whatever they're getting through, even if that's toxic positivity, like by all means, do what you need to do. But when you get to a place where it's like, well, maybe this isn't serving me. Maybe it doesn't feel good to pretend like I can't cry, or to when somebody, when I need someone to listen to me, or when I need, affirmation or help, that I just have to say, but it will be okay, but we'll figure it out, So it's just this kind of noticing if you are using toxic positivity to avoid anything negative, or to I could say deny even.
Yeah. Cause it's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
Like it's okay that it's not going to be okay. It's okay that you feel like a pool of tears.
Yeah. And the paradox is like when you allow yourself to not be okay, it's so empowering. All of a sudden it's like, screw it, screw this, screw that. Like I'm going to be fine, And so I think there's the paradox there, which it's the only way out is through, a good sort of image. If you think about kind of getting lost in a forest, like you've got to go through it to get out of it.
Right. Absolutely. And can you explain deeper, or like a deeper explanation of frustration tolerance and like what, I mean, I think about therapy and the way that you've explained it as a muscle, like that makes sense. Like you're getting better at moving through maybe grief or whatever it is, but what is frustration tolerance and how can someone go to therapy and come out with tools to deal with life?
Yeah. So frustration tolerance is just, it's building this ability to cope with being frustrated when things aren't going right, when it's, something unexpected happens, when you're caught off guard and I was going through something. It was like, I wanted to like, okay, well, Kelly, do this. And this is how you should do it. And that was my inability to tolerate my feelings around seeing her struggle or seeing her in pain. Right. So I had to build frustration tolerance, and the frustration is just sort of the sitting with the feelings, the emotions, And so me trying to help her or fix her was really just my inability to sit with discomfort, discomfort and uncomfortable feelings.
Oh yeah, I definitely have that issue. I'm always trying to fix everybody.
And that's another nice thing about in therapy. All of a sudden you're like, you'll figure it out. Like you can, you kind of get your life back in some ways because you aren't consumed by other people and what they're going through and how can you help them. And, it's kind of like, that's for them to figure out. And so you get some freedom in that way.
That's beautiful. Let's talk about grieving a little bit. You say that people are constantly grieving and they need this permission to grieve. When we start unpacking things in therapy, like how far back should we be going? Like the only experience I have is my own. So when I think about, what some of my therapy sessions looked like, it was like, well, let's talk about Sebastian's birth. And then it was like, wait a second, I have all this other pain and anger around this relationship or that relationship, or, who's taking care of what in my family or whatever it is. Like, Is there ever a point where ignorance is bliss, or it was like so much easier before you start going into the messy details? Or talk to me about grieving and what we should feel. You say you can't come out lighter, but like, what's the experience supposed to feel like? And is it normal that it feels worse when you leave?
1,000%. Like, and actually, most therapists in our informed consents, we talk about like things could get worse before they get better, and it's honestly an indication that you're there, that you're where you're supposed to be, you're doing the work. Like, it's gonna get worse before it gets better, because you're looking at things for, in new ways and for the first time, and things that we wanted to not look at. And it's literally a spider web. Like, what happens in the past continues to show up in the present, and it continues to repeat itself until we start to become familiar with it and know it and see it and name it and change it, all those sorts of things. It's all pretty interwoven. And the thing is, and I think this is why I prefer to be in therapy versus like trying to do the work on my own, because there's so many freaking nuances. Something from my past, my father had a lot of narcissistic energy. I mean, that's putting it very mildly. But we'll say that. And so, the fear is that you marry someone narcissistic, right? So I didn't think I married someone narcissistic, but I did marry someone with anxiety. And anxiety can feel very narcissistic because you're wrapped up in your, like, their fear, their anxiety, and anxiety can take someone away from connecting because they're consumed by their anxiety. And so it can feel very narcissistic. So my husband is not my father, but there is a feeling, there is a relatedness, there is a connection.
Familiarity.
Between who my dad is, although my husband is, thank God, quite different. So I think there's so many nuances to the things that we experience from the past in the present that it is overwhelming. It is consuming. Literally, my therapist was by Century City Mall, and I would walk out of sessions and just completely like numb. Like I could barely walk. I couldn't think. And it was like, what do I do? And I would go to the movie theater at the Century City Mall and like just eat popcorn and Milk Duds. And like, I didn't care what movie it was, and like cry in a dark movie theater, because it was like, I don't know what the F is happening. And it was so consuming. It was like so mind blowing. It's so overwhelming. And so there's that process too. And so if you're experiencing that, like that, just, you're going where you need to go. But you're, as the client, you're in charge. Like, you get to set the pace. Like, really, like if the therapy session's 45 minutes, there might be, in any therapy session, there might be three minutes where you're kind of getting around very difficult stuff. And that might be all anyone can handle or tolerate, but that's enough to get close to that trauma or that experience for a time, and then be in a safe environment with a trusting person and experience that differently than you did when you were impacted. And that little dose can be enough to help regulate your system, right? To keep you out of fight or flight, to build the frustration tolerance skills, the coping skills needed. And again, to my point about one reason why I go to therapy and don't just try to do the work on my own is because therapy is it's relational. It is the relationship with the therapist that helps you change, helps you heal. Like if you think of like a mommy bird feeding her baby a worm, first they eat that worm and cut it up, and then they slowly give it to the baby. And that's what happens in therapy. We get little doses of like connection, of feeling, of being seen, of being understood, of feeling like this kind of pure love from a stranger, right? Like, who knows us, that we sometimes feel like we don't know. Like, that can be frustrating for clients to be like, my therapist knows everything about me and I don't know anything about them. But what you do know is that you're being seen, you're being understood, you're having this kind of like pure love experience in someone. I hesitate. I'm like, this probably sounds too woo-woo if someone's new to therapy. I don't want to scare anyone away, but there's so much that happens in therapy that is just different than what's on the surface. And literally like ways in that relationship that regulates our nervous system if somebody is scared and petrified and wants to stay away from those feelings. And if they want to stay away from it, maybe they do need to at that time. I emailed my first therapist when I was graduating grad school, and I said, hey, you wouldn't believe it, but I don't know if you remember me, I gave her like a little, a little snippet of like who I was. And I said, I'm now becoming a therapist. And I entered, I went into therapy and did some of the work I could have never done with you. And not because she wasn't an amazing therapist, but it wasn't the right time for me. It was too much to sort of look at some of those things. It would have been way too painful. And it just wasn't the right time. So if a client comes to me and not everyone's always ready. And I think most therapists know that, honor that, and respect that. And whenever they are ready, they'll land where they need to land and show up and be able to tolerate the work when it's time.
I love that. When it comes to searching out your first therapist or finding a therapist, you guys have OK Humans. It seems like we have one location in San Vicente. Are you guys open? Are you thinking about going virtual? Are you thinking about opening other stores? Like, what's the plan for OK Humans? Because I feel like everyone listening is going to be like, how do I get to San Vicente?
Yes, come to however you can come. No, so we have the one location, and this is our first location. We literally just opened our doors yesterday. We'll be here. We're going to see how it's received and what people think. It's a little different in that we're visible, right? I think it's really important that we're visible. I think it's going to help change the conversation and really give permission people to continue to seek out help. But so we're going to see how it goes, and we hope to expand and have other locations and to get to other cities so we can help more and more people. And if you live in California, there is an option to do virtual therapy, but we really, again, like that relationship is so important. We really want to meet you in person. And so if you can't continue to stay in person, whether that's your schedule or maybe you live in a different part of California, but maybe you come to LA for your doctor's visits or something, like maybe you can work it into your routine where you pop into OK Humans and then do your other sessions virtually. So there is a virtual option if it makes sense, if it helps the client, right? Like if it would be a good thing for them and we think we would be able to best help them. If not, we'll help you find someone or somewhere that can better help you.
I love it so much. It's such an amazing idea. And you have obviously been an entrepreneur in the past, hairstylist turned mommy and me entrepreneur, turned marriage and family therapist, turns entrepreneur in the marriage and family therapy space.
I'm ready to retire.
Yeah, she's done. I would love, we talked about it a little bit before the call, but for people out there with a really good idea like this, can we talk about like the nitty gritty of deciding you were going to start this business and how you reached out to all these people to help you do it?
Yeah. So this is not a therapy plug, but I'm not trying to sell therapy, but honestly, like the OK Humans exist because of my therapist. I mean, this was a long process in the making, and there were different times where I would say, I felt so compelled to do it. I didn't know why. And honestly, there were times when I didn't want to do it. And there's a lot that I'm weighing. Like my daughter's turning 17 in a couple days, and she's a senior and she's going to college. And I'm like, I don't want to be preoccupied with something else. I want to be there at these formative times in my kids' lives and stuff. And so there are lots of moments when I tried to talk myself out of doing OK Humans, and I couldn't. And I felt so compelled. And there was also a moment where I think, my God, like, what do I know? Am I crazy? Right? Like, who am I? And like, just because I have an idea doesn't mean I have to do anything with it. And so literally like my therapist she sent me an article of a place in Canada that was kind of what she's like, here's your idea, and so there are like little moments of being pushed and prodded along the way. And again, like sort of talking about all the things and processing the stress and the grief and all of that, giving me the courage to keep going. And so I think that was first and foremost, to just make sure you kind of take care of yourself in that way and check yourself and know that like it's going to be scary and you might be wrong and you can fail and that's okay. And those are all the conversations I constantly had in therapy. And even like reaching out to people, it's so embarrassing to reach out to people. I think of the first few people I told, like, hey, I had this idea for affordable talk therapy in a trendy place in LA, like the Drybar. That was like, I like wrote it on a napkin and gave it to these two businessmen when I heard them talking about investing in things at a cafe. And I was like, oh my gosh, they have to think I'm crazy. And that is so embarrassing. But it was all those little things like, not that anything came from that napkin conversation, although that guy sent me an email and said, read this book if you want to be an entrepreneur, which was like so kind of him. But what it really did was it just gave me the ability to keep putting myself out there and building that tolerance of like feeling so vulnerable and embarrassed, but not sinking into that feeling and stopping there, but to just keep going. And so for me, I had this idea, and I'm like, just like in therapy, it's like I had to name it. Just like we have to name our feelings to get an understanding of them. So I reached out to a local branding agency. I'd heard about them on a podcast, all these little things that lead you places. And so it's called Project M Plus. And so they're amazing. It's like a husband and partner. He's an architect and she's a designer, and they do branding and stuff. And so we named it OK Humans. They helped put a look together. And then honestly, I did it because I'm like, how am I going to get a landlord to give me a lease? Nothing, I need to help people see what this is. Yeah. And so I put together a brand book so I could help a landlord understand what I was trying to do to hopefully, rent me a space. And in doing that, I went to Felicia Alexander from Box Union, and just different people who I kind of knew of or wanted to know and knew they were doing cool things and creating neat brands and community and all that stuff. And so I would tell anyone and everyone. And I went to Felicia, and she knew Brittany. Meanwhile, I had been Instagramming Brittany Driscoll, who is the CEO of Squeeze, and she was a former VP of marketing at Drybar, and she worked with Allie. And I'd also emailed Allie the moment that the Squeeze was announced. There was a press release, and they talked about their interest in wellness and how they wanted to get into wellness. And I immediately sent Allie an email, and I had her email because I was a hairstylist at Drybar all those years ago. And I said, hey, former hairstylist, I saw, congratulations on Squeeze. I saw what you're doing. I have an idea that I want to do for talk therapy. I'd love 15 minutes of your time. Can I pay you for a consultation? Which I'd heard that you offer that on a podcast, right? To let people know you're a little more serious, right?
Right.
You're not trying to get something for free. And so yeah, I was just listening to other people's story, learning what I could and doing whatever. But I eventually, after months of instant DMing with Brittany, I had got my brand deck finished. I sent her a picture of hey, this is what this space could look like. And so we set up a coffee date, and I told her what I was doing. And I literally wanted to know, who do you use for employee benefits? I've been talking with this PR agency. Have you ever heard anything about them? I'm looking on the west side, but I'm open to going anywhere. How do you like being in Studio City? Because that's where Squeeze was. And so I think maybe being one of five, I like other people and I like their ideas, and I want to know kind of what have other people learned. I was the fourth, so I played basketball, but my sister played basketball first. I ran track, but my sister ran track. So I'm kind of what are you doing? How do you do it? And
fast track it.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I was trying to do with Brittany. And also to me, even from the very beginning, OK Humans felt much bigger than me. It felt like I could do a version of this on my own, but I didn't want to miss an opportunity, which was, this felt much bigger than me. It doesn't feel, but it feels like it needs to be in the world. And so I didn't want to do it wrong. And I wanted people to help, and I wanted pros. And so Brittany immediately loved what I was doing, and she started asking odd questions am I in any contracts, and do I have a partner? And I didn't want to get too excited because I'm and surely they're not, surely she's not interested in partnering, but they were. She took it to Allie. And the second I left Brittany's office at Squeeze in Studio City, I was walking down the street and I saw Allie Webb. And so I immediately stopped her and I'm oh my gosh, hi, I just talked to Brittany. I have this idea. And I quick 2-second, pitch her. And then they're back channeling, of course, after the fact. And we became partners, and, with them, we got Cam Webb, from Allie's ex-husband, took over the established brand, which was this amazing foundation. It was called OK Humans. It had the little face and all those things, which is interesting because Squeeze has a face too, but that was actually in existence. And then they took over the brand and brought it to life in a different way and in new ways. And he's, the genius behind Drybar and all that stuff. So it's so nice to have their expertise. And we worked with the same architect that they worked with, but then we also consulted. We went back with and collaborated with Project M Plus, who I had worked with before, and I know she has amazing taste. Cleo's her name, and so she helped with some of the interiors, and so it really was just this effort of OK Humans needs to be in the world. We need to help as many people as possible. How do we do that? And who can help execute on a way that really puts people at ease, makes them excited about therapy. Not only just trying to get people in here, but people who've already and to some degree experience therapy or know that it's helpful, I think they feel really excited and seen and empowered and kind of like, I tell my friends about therapy, now I can tell them to come here, all those sorts of things. So it's just checking a lot of boxes for a lot of people. It's what I hope it continues to do, and that we can grow so more people can be helped.
I love it. It's exactly what's going to happen. I'm super excited about it. So thank you so much for putting this out into the world and being a team player and bringing people on like Brittany and Allie to just kind of help you rocket this into the atmosphere so that everyone can come in contact with it. Like I can see these popping up everywhere. And it's really exciting to see. So congratulations on everything. I'm going to make sure everyone knows where to go and how to follow along. But if they're interested in learning more, where should they go online to learn more about OK Humans?
Yeah, they can go to okhumans.com. You can download our app for your iPhone in the App Store. Of course, like on Instagram or OK Humans, there's more information there as well. So yeah, and then just come grab a yummy pizza at Pisana and a cupcake at Susie Cakes and pop in. We'll show you around. So
I love it. You can get a 10-minute consultation. Sessions are 45 minutes. Go check it out if you guys are in Brentwood. Home, that's like my stomping ground. So it's awesome. Perfect little location. So
yeah. And we're more affordable than private practice. I don't even know if I mentioned that, but if you're a member and you come once a week, it breaks down to be $124 per session. So, we wanted to make it like Drybar did for blowouts. We wanted to try to make it as affordable as possible.
How much is like traditional therapy right now?
So like private practice by our location is $200 to $250.
Phenomenal.
That's the starting point. Yeah. You could come for $124 if you came once a week, or if you just wanted to try it and pop in, it's $180 per session.
Okay.
And if you have out-of-network benefits, we reimburse. We do everything with the insurance company, so you just get the check in the mail, and you don't have to have the hassle of like the super bill and all that.
I love that so much. Such a customer service driven concept, and really demystifying therapy and bringing that into the wellness realm is so important. Like it doesn't matter how clean you eat and how much you work out. If you've got stuff going on up top, I mean, we got to work through that. We got to work through our traumas, and we have to start grieving so that we can build our frustration tolerance. So, and not be toxically positive. I really don't want to be that person.
You are. I don't think you are.
But this has been a really fun conversation, Christy. I'm so excited for you guys. Thank you for being here and for following through with a really amazing idea. I should probably give your therapist a call and thank her.
Oh my gosh, I shouted her out on my Instagram. So
okay, good.
You can follow her. She has some great content too.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for everything, Christy. I'm so excited for you guys.
Thank you so much. So nice to meet you, Kelly.
You too.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.